What's up, nerds and nerdettes and wee little nerdlings all? Your buddy Big Johnny G from Two Gun Pixie Presents Legendary Gaming is back again for another Midday Monologue. So it is October 2nd as of the filming and dropping of this video. October. What does October mean? Well, it means a lot of things, but to me and to a lot of people, it means Halloween. Halloween, a time of monsters and horror and dread. Well, time of our ancestors as well. A time of spirits walking the earth. A time of fear. A time of dread. Yes, horror. Horror movies and horror TV shows are huge hits, but so are horror-based board games. What does that mean? Horror-based board game. Well, horror itself is defined as an intense fear, an intense dread feeling that comes over you. I've gotten that from reading books to a small degree. I've also gotten that from movies to a small degree, especially when I was younger. But a board game? I'm not so sure. I mean, has anyone out there actually played a board game that has filled you with fear and loathing and dread? I know none have done that to me. And I love horror games. In fact, I love horror games so much, I've had to divide my horror category into 3 different shelves. One for the general horror, one for zombies, and one for Cthulhian, Lovecraftian sort of horrors. And I barely have enough room as it is. If I get any more, it's going to be needing another shelf. But what is it? I mean, because really, you're not feeling dread. You're not feeling this sense of immediate loss. There's no fear in a board game. I have never played a board game that has incited fear in me or the other players. No matter how horrific the monsters or the characters in it may be. You know, one of the greatest horror novels of all time, Dracula. We just played and dropped a 20-sided shots this weekend for Fury of Dracula by Final Fantasy Flight by Fantasy Flight Games. I always get them mixed up with another company. Sorry. By Fantasy Flight Games, Fury of Dracula, 3rd edition, and we loved it. It was a great game, but not at one point did any of us feel any horror. Did we feel fear? Did we feel dread? Fate of the Elder Gods by Greater Than Games' Fabled Nexus imprint. Again, another game that we've recently dropped a video for after playing it. You know, and this is deep madness of horror. This is the cosmic banality of nothing being meaningful at all because we're all insignificant. And that's just touching the surface of Cthulhian horror. Not even mentioning the extra-dimensional, out-of-time creatures, the elder beings and old ones. But did we feel fear? Did we feel horror from it? Dread? A sense of hopelessness? No, not at all. There's a lot of games out there that claim to be horror games. And they are in the sense that they are just based on a horrific concept. But the idea of actually a horror game? No, there's no board game out there that induces fear, that induces dread, much less an intense feeling of this. Anxiety is different. I'll give you that. Anxiety is different. Like, my wife likes Forbidden Island, but she doesn't really care for Forbidden Desert because there's a lot more going on, and she feels a little overwhelmed by all the sand dunes and everything that keep piling up. So that gives her a sense of anxiety, but it's not fear. It's not fear at all. There's a good difference between the two. So, do horror games actually exist, or are they all just monster games? And if that's the case, if it's a monster game, then every fantasy game would be no more different than a horror game, because they're filled with monsters. But we just don't think of orcs and trolls and fairy creatures, the Unseelie court of the evil fairy creatures. We don't consider them monsters anymore. We consider them fables at worst, maybe types of humanoids at best, but we definitely don't see them as monsters. Vampires are only barely considered monsters anymore, thanks to the horrific work destroying the whole mythology of them by people like Bram Stoker and Anne Rice. but they're still monsters. If you look at the base core mythologies from around the world where they come from, they are most definitely monsters that would make you poop your pants if you met one in real life, to say the least. But it never comes off that way in a game. Letters to Whitechapel. It's all about hunting down Jack the Ripper. There's a real life monster based on a real incident, on a real human being. Nothing. As far as fear goes, nothing. No. It's a fun game to play. Hidden movement, all versus one. Sure. But is it horror? Are any of the zombie games horror? No. Because again, we're not getting that sense of hopelessness and dread, that intense feeling of fear from any board game. If I'm wrong about this, please put it in the comments down below and let me know what game it was that you genuinely felt horror from. So I'm not even sure if horror games are real. They're just games. Now, anyway, this is October. Halloween is right around the corner. And, that's what I was thinking of. Now, I still like those kind of board games, but I don't consider them horror. Not really, not at their core. They can't be, because there's nothing horrific. There's nothing fear-inducing about them. They are just loosely based on horrific concepts and ideas. But I still like them. And I can't take that away. So whether you like horror-based games or not, that really doesn't change the fact that there's no such thing as horror board games. I'm your host, Big Johnny G, and Two Gun Pixie presents Legendary Gamings, and we are everywhere. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're here on YouTube. Check us out, subscribe, follow, like. You're going to have a good time. We cover all sorts of nerdy things, not just the board game stuff that you see here on YouTube, but that's it. Check us out. So, I am out of here.